Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori. So today I want to share with you the books that I read in April of 2020. I had a pretty good month. I read 8 books. Most of the books that I read this month were honestly read in the last week and a half of the month, because the first half I was in a horrible reading slump until I got to Rage of Dragons. And then that kind of helped, and then I couldn't stop reading for the last week and a half of the month. So that was good. All of the books that I read this month, I rated 3 stars and above, so I had a pretty darn good reading month, and I feel pretty good about it. The first book I read in April was Red Seas Under Red Skies, which is the second book of the Gentleman Bastard series, and it follows the lies of Loch Lamora. Now, this was an amazing book. I do have a spoiler-filled chat video for this book that I will link in the comments below. It's an amazing book. You know, if you're an epic fantasy fan and you haven't dived into the lies of Loch Lamora yet, it's really, really fantastic. The characters are amazing, very character-driven, with a very intense, interesting plot line in both of these books. I actually just started reading book 3, and as you can see, I'm a good chunk of the way into this book, and it's, again, fantastic. So I have not met a Gentleman Bastards book that I did not like. The second book that I read in April was The Sculptor by Scott McCloud. This is a giant graphic novel, and just to give you an idea of the kind of art style in here, it's very beautiful, very well done. So The Sculptor follows the story of a young man who basically trades his soul in exchange for being able to create absolutely whatever he wants as a sculptor. And then he's given a certain amount of time before his death in order to create whatever he wants. And this becomes very tangled when he falls in love with the woman of his dreams, and they become very involved with each other. The story was really good, and I enjoyed it up until the very end, where a couple of things happened that I won't spoil, but they really rubbed me the wrong way. It's really not cool when the political commentary in books literally has no place other than to just be there. But overall, the story was really entertaining, really easy to read. I think I read this in an afternoon. Yeah, it was good. It was fine. It was a 3-star book. All right, I finally read Starsight by Brandon Sanderson. This is the sequel to his book Skyward, which I really enjoyed, and I also have a review of that book, which I will link in the description below. This was good. It definitely moves slower than Skyward did. I did like a lot of the character development in this book. It's definitely a setup book for the next 1 or 2. I don't know how many he's gonna write in this set. But it definitely ended on a cliffhanger, and I definitely need to know what happens. And now the 3rd book probably isn't coming out until next year sometime. So, you know, it's Brandon Sanderson, so at least we don't have to wait that long, but still, it was very good. I gave it a 4-star rating. The main character, Spensa, is definitely still very easy to follow, mostly likable, and the cast of characters surrounding her in this book, while there were a lot of new ones, were still very intriguing and interesting, and he really does some strange things with just science fiction in general. He's really thinking outside the box with a lot of these characters, and I really appreciated that. Alright, the next book that I read was Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter, which I do have my spoiler-filled chat for my book club group, and that I will also link in the description box below. I think it's probably the last video I uploaded before this one, so check that out if you want to know, if you've read this book and you want to know my full thoughts on everything. I have that. Overall, this is the story of a young man named Tau Solarin who lives in a very African flavor culture, has a very distinct hierarchy within the noble and lesser classes, and also in the military. It's very military focused, and it's kind of a story of what happens when you allow revenge to basically rule your life. Evan Winter did a fantastic job with the world building and the kind of motley crew of main characters. There was a motley crew in it, which I really appreciated. I loved the relationships there, some great friendship themes. The love story in this, mostly sort of kind of here for it sometimes. That's the best thing I can give you. I think where this book really shines is in the military aspect and the kind of like brotherhood aspect of the main motley crew of soldiers. Okay, the next book that I read in April was Dry by Neal Shusterman and Jared Shusterman. This is my first reading of a book by Neal Shusterman. I know he's a very prolific author. He's written like a gajillion and one books. This is the list of books that he's written, and I'm sure there's some missing because this was written a couple of years ago. I'm not going to say too much about this because I'm going to have a video coming out with this. I did this as a buddy read with Cozy Reader Kelly. This was a very difficult book to read right now. It definitely has some similarities to what's going on with legislation and all that kind of stuff surrounding the quarantine right now, and I'm not gonna lie, it was well written. It was very well written, and it definitely was thrilling and suspenseful in most of the parts of the book. However, I will say if you're having a hard time dealing with everything that's going on right now, I don't know that I would recommend reading this. It's definitely not going to put you in a great frame of mind. So it's definitely a survival story. Basically, all of the water in California gets turned off and people turn to mob mentality and start going crazy. And it's the story of a group of teenagers trying to survive. Like I said, it's a well-written story, and I do recommend it if you like kind of YA thriller-esque sort of feel to your books. But again, just be careful with it if you are having a hard time dealing with everything right now. After Dry, I desperately needed a pick-me-up. I had bought this adorable little collection of comics by Katana Chetwynd, and I had seen these on Facebook. They are the cutest thing. It's a collection of comics about dating your best friend. Having been married extremely happily to the love of my life for the last 10 years, there are so many relatable, just everyday cute little moments in this book that I think we often overlook, and they're just precious and wonderful. This is one that my husband and I can definitely relate to because he is not super flexible and I'm extremely flexible. So this one was really cute. They're both trying to touch their toes and exercise, and John, her boyfriend, cannot reach his toes, and it's really cute. Also after Dry, and I had read the Snug comics, and I just needed kind of a pick-me-up. I needed something safe and familiar, and so I picked up Mara, Daughter of the Nile, which, as I've mentioned on my channel before, is one of my all-time favorite books. It's a historical fiction about a young woman who's an Egyptian slave, and she gets bought by a new master and kind of swept up into this double agent mess within Egyptian politics. And it's incredibly good. It's very fast-paced. The characters are amazing. It's a slow burn romance that I absolutely love to pieces. One of the things about historical fiction I have noticed is that a lot of times the writers will take kind of the way we talk and move in society and try to put that in a historical context instead of really going back and trying to learn how these people would have held themselves, carried themselves, talked in these different cultures. And I think that's something that Eloise Jarvis McGraw does very well. It doesn't sound like a bunch of American people in ancient Egypt. It sounds like the way they talk, the way they move and dress and everything else is very believable in the context of ancient Egypt. So I really appreciate that about her, and this book is just fabulous. I love it to death. There's a lot of little details in here of Egyptian daily life that I think is really cool and interesting. So yeah, the last book that I read, I needed something really short. It was on April 30th, and I needed one more book on my list because I don't know, I just needed one. So I read The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. I also read this in one sitting because it's very small and tiny. And this was a 5-star read for me. Wow, like once again, I know you guys are probably gonna get sick of me just being amazed by Brandon Sanderson, but the creativity within fantasy that he shows, and this is like, he can do the same thing between a tiny novella like this to a YA series, to an epic fantasy series, to, I mean, it's just crazy how you still get that same powerful Brandon Sanderson magic flavor in all of the books that he writes, with the exception of The Reckoners, but I won't go into that. For somebody who is just looking to get into Sanderson to kind of test him out and see if he is a style of writer that you're interested in pursuing and just kind of see what his writing is like, man, this would be a good place to start, because even though it does tie in with some of his other Cosmere books, you don't need any kind of prior knowledge to read this book. It's definitely a very solid standalone. Anyway, let me know what your favorite books for April were down in the comments, and also let me know what your absolute favorite books that you love to read over and over, your comfort reads. Let me know what those are down in the comments. I hope you guys are all staying happy and healthy, and I will see you in the next video.